episode. There we
Oh,
go.
that's exactly what would happen. We almost not
Ah,
recorded our episode.
I gotta watch you, man.
Absolutely. Welcome to Over 50 Starting Over. It is the beginning of season 2, episode 1.
Yes.
I'm Barry Edwards.
And I'm Merle Garrison.
Yeah, so very excited about kicking this off. We got lots of things that we want to talk about. It's going to be a very full hour, and we will not get to everything. But got a lot of important stuff we want to clear the air with. But, starting off on the O5O segment part, though, I wanted to tell you about a very interesting Zoom conversation that I had yesterday with old friend and client Steve Reissig. And Steve has been teaching leadership skills and those kind of things to companies for years. And he's been doing it both on his own, which I helped him out with years ago, and also as a consultant for different companies that outsource him. And anyways, he got we hadn't seen each other for a while, and he wanted to do this Zoom thing, and he says, I ran into somebody that I should tell you that his career really started in the 80s with Honda, and he got identified to be one of the people chosen by like Mr. Honda, literally Mr. Honda, to help lead the lean education throughout the United States plants. That was kind of new around that time.
And there is a Mr. Honda.
Yeah, that didn't come from nowhere. Yeah. And there is. So he's one of the originators of lean. He's like the expert on it. And he said he ran into somebody recently who gave him the bright idea that he should be doing this lean as his own consulting gig. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. Everybody's like, yeah, no kidding. And so he's been listening to the show. And so he wanted to talk, this is the kind of stuff we talk about. And he says, so what do you think about that? And that was a landslide of, oh yeah, first, we need to put an outline of what your services are. See, a very important thing that a lot of people want to know about right now is how are we going to move forward for at least the next year? When someone like him, who would be reliant upon some company to bring him in for X amount of time, maybe it's a week, a month, probably a month. And I have another client that does electrical safety training, keeps people OSHA compliant. He goes into companies for about 2 days at a time to do their training right there on site. And for the next year, man, they're going to be hurting, and they know it. So they're both working on online training classes. And this is what Steve and I talked about. So we could put this together and do it just like my stuff, where it all leads in with a video. And I told them about how to do it, because if you're not used to doing video, you're going to come off like you're talking off a teleprompter. Or you probably will be doing that, and it'll be so unengaging. It's like you know your stuff. You know it inside and out. So take a couple points that you want to speak to at a time and practice them. I said it once on the show before. I told him, take my 30-day challenge. Shoot a couple-minute video every day for 30 days. Don't miss a day, no matter what. You'll be shocked at how much better you are. You will start off trying to memorize stuff in your head, and it's going to look like you're reading off a teleprompter in your brain. It'll come off just as inauthentic, but by the end of it, you're going to be free flowing. And
right.
Yeah, and it's going to come off very engaging. So take that challenge. And I said, and then we got to figure out your sales funnel, how to engage. Start off with a webinar, a free webinar, and which may or do it coincide it possibly with a quiz, and a free online quiz to find out, because this is what his initial meeting with a new prospect would be, is figuring out where they are in the lean cycle. Some may be at the beginning, some may be halfway through their achievements and their efficiencies. So he has to identify that. Take this free quiz, collect their email address, start building the list, and then start funneling them down into classes. So then with his online classes, I said, well, you need a membership site that you hide this thing behind so you can sell these different modules. And this is the stuff that, I help people with. So it's it's also, it's like, well, how do you differentiate? How do you keep the accountability? And we said, well, you can just offer like a once a week 1 or 2 hour class where live, where you're assessing what took place that week, accountability, answer all their questions, and set up goals for next week. This way, okay, now you have the entire country at your disposal. Okay, you freed up so much of your time, and then your follow up is, well, it's so largely automated. So you're at least 75% of the way automated. And now you can even lower your prices. If your price was $30,000 for this package to come into a company for a month, you can now sell it for $3,000.
Yeah.
But host 10 more at a time.
Yeah.
So
think about the
exactly.
implications there. You're
This is what
lowering your travel costs. Your
Yeah.
cost of doing business is so much lower. I mean, this is what we've talked about, the new paradigm and thinking
Yeah.
outside of the box as far as this COVID-19 has offered serious opportunities for us. And everybody is doing this video thing now on Zoom. Zoom has been
We're
a
used to it.
thing. Yeah. And yeah, look at this. We've actually pioneered this whole, everyone's copying off of us.
Oh, you know what? We're not side by side right now. Now we
Oh
are.
my gosh. Okay. Thank God. I don't want to get that butt kicking again.
Yeah, really. See, I got to keep my eye on you. You didn't notice that.
I didn't. I don't know how I would notice that because it always looks like that for me.
Ah, really? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't
It never
know
goes
that.
away. Yeah.
No,
that's exactly it.
I should
See,
have caught
we
that.
learn as we go along here.
Again, season two is off to the same start.
There we go.
No, I think that but I just want to kind of wrap up this conversation, that it's a very important conversation that a lot of us need to have about how we can move more of our services online and automate them, because people like Steve, my other client, Brian, they are hurting and wondering what they're going to be doing for the next year.
Right.
So,
right. I think everyone's in the same boat right now. I mean, yeah, we're talking over 50 starting over, but gosh, if you take a look at what's happening right now, the unemployment rate, the number is going to come out tomorrow, but they're predicting it to be 19%.
Oh.
Do you know that we haven't seen unemployment rates like that since the Great Depression?
Oh, that's just so disheartening. Oh boy.
I know. And so I guess my point is that the help that you're giving to your friend and associate is key right now, because even during the Great Depression, there were people that became millionaires during that time. Think about it. Back then, millionaires, that's like being a billionaire today.
Very true. Very true.
You know, it's not all doom and gloom. There's opportunity out there. As a matter of fact, today, this morning, the way that I woke up this morning was I heard this huge air compressor going on and all kinds of racket and noise. And of course, that didn't put me in a good mood. But I look outside, and this guy's got a van out there, and he's power washing my neighbor's cars. Look, they've shut down all the car washes out here, and he's got a power washer. They've got this air compressor that they're drying it off with and everything. Of course, I was pretty upset at first because I usually don't wake up in a good mood, but that really set me off. But then I started thinking, how do I invest in these guys? I mean, But yeah, we're looking at a lot. Is
this what you're saying? Is this guy, did he get a kind of agile and make a mobile business right there on the fly?
He didn't do it. He hired people that did it. And so they came right out to us. We Anne Marie and I have been talking about this, that our car is all, dirty, and we live in a townhouse. But most people out here live either in a townhouse or they live in some kind of an apartment. Not everybody gets to live in a house out here. So you can't just go outside and wash your car like you could in your driveway if you have a house. Right. So here's a business that now gets to take advantage of the fact that all the car washes have been closed for 6 weeks or so.
What else is going on in California? I understand that they closed the beaches and parks. The parks were closed though, weren't they?
They were. So it's so our Governor Newsom, had really taken a hard line approach, because I don't know, everybody probably saw this in the news over the last week. I know it hit the national news. All these people were on the beach, and there was a lot of them. As a matter of fact, Anne Marie and I went down. We went for a drive down Pacific Coast Highway. And it's pretty cool to drive down Pacific Coast Highway. Here's another advantage: is no traffic down there anymore, because all the beaches are closed, and you don't have all the craziness, and you can just see beautiful beach without all that crazy stuff going on. Well, we went there last Friday, and it wasn't that at all. There was traffic everywhere, people driving around like their brains were unplugged. People were parking in the, like, they've coned off all of the parking areas for the beaches. People didn't care. They were all parked on there, and because the cones were there, they were all out in the middle of the street with their big trucks and stuff like that, and everyone walking around in their swimsuits and everything. And Anne Marie and I, and not only that, we saw a lot of police out there en masse. No police officer doing anything. They were all walking out on the beach and everything, and our beaches are closed. Well, they did open up beaches down in Orange County, south of here, and we saw on the news that night where it was just massive people that were out there. Well, that didn't sit well for our governor, and he actually came on, and this was much like what we talked about with Marion Sheridan, where there was the governor there came back and said, "Oh, you're protesting, or we're going to extend the stay-at-home order," sort of threatening people because they're going to spread this virus. Well, that's exactly what Gavin Newsom did. He came out and said,
he's doing the nanny state thing.
Oh, absolutely, the nanny state. And we're closing all the beaches, and not only that, we're going to prosecute anybody that's doing that. Now, here's something that I found out today. That all the video that was taken of what happened out there, a little bit misleading, because when we saw drone pictures of what it actually was out there, people were keeping their social distancing. People were not all on top of each other. Yet in the national news, you see people all on top of each other. And it just looks like, how dare they do that? Well, here's what else is interesting. We're seeing that all across the nation right now, where we saw what was it, Jacksonville opened up their beaches last weekend, and it looked like massive amounts of people. Well, the news was reporting that other beaches were opening, and they were showing pictures, the same pictures as the pictures that were in Jacksonville. So it seems like there's a media collaboration to make it look like the people that are going to these beaches are doing something that is nefarious, and they're pictured that way when that might not actually be the fact.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the media is complicit on putting false information out there?
Dare I say.
It's all we ever talk about, you know? It's all we ever talk about. It's gotten ridiculous.
Well, it really has. I mean, what are we going to do about this? How do they get away with it all the time?
I've been seeing all week, inject yourself with Lysol. Can you believe Trump wants you to inject yourself with Lysol? I am seeing that everywhere, and from people that I love. Okay.
I know.
And it's embarrassing, because it's like, do you really not think for yourself? And here's the double-edged sword for me. First of all, I saw the video, the press conference with Trump, and he's so hard for me to watch in any regard, because he's so embarrassing and he's cringy, and a level of narcissism behind, with him is just beyond reproach. I mean, I've never seen anything like it, so I can't stand listening to him. But he didn't say that. And
No,
that's
he didn't.
so these about 40% of our population is very much enjoying getting their dopamine fix by going onto CNN and learning what their talking points are to be for that day, and then just with glee push them out, or shoehorn them into any conversation, or I like to read comments on everything online, shoehorn them in onto an entertainment site or something, and try to turn that into it. but I have read studies that literally people get this little dopamine rush from this kind of thing. It's addictive. So
Yeah.
this whole derangement syndrome thing is totally real. I mean,
Well, it seems
witnessing it
like
all the time.
organizations like CNN are. I mean, it seems like that's their whole goal, is to spur this on and cause that to happen. And I mean, they're not the only ones, but they're the ones that we see all the time. Gosh, I even saw where they had well, I can't remember the name of the organization that had hidden microphones, and they were talking to some of the people from CNN, and they were talking about how the president, Zucker is his last name, had they how he's really directing the news to show Trump in the
He was on
worst
hidden
possible light. Yeah,
Well, and no, the CEO was on camera twice, hidden camera twice, a year or two ago. Zucker, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Admitting that he knows the whole Russian thing's a hoax, but it's good for the ratings.
Right. And it's all about ratings and not actually what the truth is. And so this whole thing about disinfectants, and I saw the conversation as well.
It was embarrassing. The level of dumbness to it was pretty high.
I don't, I mean, that's debatable. I think what they were talking about is, I think what he was talking about actually made sense. And maybe I wouldn't have said it the way that he said it, but, he said disinfectant. And what we're talking about is a virus, and that infects people. And he was making a correlation of disinfectant, the virus being killed by disinfectant, and how do we take that same concept and apply it to the human body? That's what he was talking about.
True.
And that totally makes sense.
And it does. I could see a version of that in the near future where these nanobites are carrying a disinfectant internally. And we're going to find huge success with it.
Well, when you take a look at some of these treatments that we're talking about, they do kill the virus. That's what you're looking to be able to do, which you could say is disinfecting. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just ridiculous.
Never said inject.
No,
and he never said Lysol. He didn't say that at all.
Joe Biden came out. I mean, there was all these different people that came out. Hillary Clinton came out. Do not disinfect. Don't shoot Lysol into yourself or inject Lysol into yourself. And even Lysol came out with some kind of a warning. But Joe Biden came out and said, please do not drink bleach. What? Biden. What is up with him?
I swear it's everybody. I say the same thing everybody else says. Would love to have him over for a cookout. He would be a riot.
He would.
Don't want him running my country. I wouldn't even let him grill.
No, stay away from the grill. Stay away from the fire.
Right. But he would be fun.
I was watching a conference today that Trump had from the White House, and he was asked an inflammatory question, actually, by Jim Acosta, and they were talking about H1N1 and the shortage of masks, and he was saying, well, this is Acosta, the Obama administration says that there was no shortage of masks, and Trump says, well, hold on a second. He says, when H1N1 came out, or as Joe Biden would say, N1H1. And I just cracked up. I thought that was hilarious. Okay, you might not like the guy. I happen to think, and yet I cringe a lot of the things that he says, but sometimes he says the funniest stuff.
He does sometimes, but I'm so embarrassed for him. I'm embarrassed that he can't be embarrassed for himself. That's at the level. You know what? I want to say something though, that as we talk about, I always talk about how much I hate CNN and the propaganda, the whole, all the lies that they just cannot wait to put out there. And it's the whole mainstream media, but CNN leads the pack. I say that all the time, but I have to also put out there, I can't watch anything on Fox outside of the 5 at 5, which I really, really like for the most part. But dude, I can't watch anything else on Fox because of the same reason in the opposite direction. It's like it's like tabloid for the right, you know? That's my opinion. I'm sure that you differ with it, but I got to
Well,
say it.
I mean, I gotta say, what my motto is this: is I don't trust any of them. You know,
True.
I don't. To Fox is not the gospel, and I
Agreed.
happen to agree more with them than I do with CNN. That I like the Five, by the way, too.
Yeah.
And I like what's that guy? The funny guy there.
Jesse?
The other guy,
Juan?
the
Oh,
little guy.
Greg.
Greg Gutfeld cracks me up. I gotta
He
say,
has the best monologues. That guy
he
is
really
a hell
does.
of a writer, man. He does that every day.
He's really something. His takes are great. I've seen him get mad a couple of times, and
Sure.
it's kind of fun actually with seeing that guy get mad. But
It is. They can all lay into Juan a little too much from time to time. Juan Williams is on there to represent the left.
poor
And
guy.
I
Takes a
agree.
lot of courage to do that.
It does. And I absolutely believe a good deal of the time he doesn't believe in what he's saying. He's just doing his job.
I hear you. Sometimes I'm like, oh, Juan.
Yeah. Well, we both agree. He is I mean, he seems like
Ah,
a very high character guy.
I would live next door to that guy.
Would love to. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got to have the best family in the world,
Yeah, I would think so too. And he's a guy you can talk to. And that's the thing,
Yeah.
Barry, is we now live in a time where there are people that you can talk to about
Mm.
politics, and then
Mhm.
there's people you just can't even talk to without them making a personal character judgment about you and throwing that in your face.
Yeah, and somehow blaming it on Trump.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because I don't participate in the TDS conversations, and I'm sorry that pisses a lot of people off, but it's just absolute reality out there. Um, because I don't participate in those, I'll sit here and tell you all day long how embarrassing I find him to be, and how I really wanted to vote for Tulsi Gabbard in the upcoming election. But no, they give us Biden, and he's has to pick a female for VP because that's how screwed up that party is, and concerned about race, gender, and all that crap. I forgot how I started off on that. Because I don't participate in Trump hate stuff, then I am considered to be far right in their eyes.
Well, that brings up a pretty good subject here, Barry, and we've had this conversation offline about the Democratic Party and what's happened within the Democratic Party, which has moved very far to the left.
Way
And
far.
what we're seeing here is a transition from a liberal party, which has been what we've known the Democratic Party to be, at
Mm.
least during our lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
really to what's being called the Progressive Party.
Which is
And
Marxism.
it really is. And so what we're seeing here is that there's really a difference between liberals and progressives, and that they are
Huge.
not the same. And, as I was saying before, is that how can a liberal and a progressive or leftist even have anything that they can agree on? Because what I know about liberals is that they are beholden to the Constitution, that they
Mm-hmm.
believe in what the Constitution,
Freedoms.
the
Yeah.
what the Declaration of Independence, that stands for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's really what drives the country. But then you have this progressive party, and I think it's a big misnomer. We've called
Yes.
it leftist, but I would also say, isn't progressive a strange name for what they're calling themselves? Because if you really look at it, isn't it regressive rather than
It's very,
progressive?
very regressive, but they are a faction that likes to pat themselves on the back and hoist themselves up above the crowd. They want to be seen. They want to think of themselves as the moral authorities on a personal level with their personal convictions, where they can yell, cry, and scream at the top of their lungs if they feel like they're being victimized. So they look for reasons to say that they're being victimized. The other thing is this woke term.
Oh, God, I can't stand that term.
What another way to pat yourself on the back. And so if you believe all of this crap that is absolutely unnatural, to try to put everybody into these little boxes and pit them against each other, basically they're always just trying to say you're a victim and I'm going to help you. I feel for you.
Okay, so the first thing I have a problem with the term woke is the English language. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
went to school and I found out that I woke up, but you can't say I'm woke. That's not grammatically correct.
Right.
It's like Ebonics. I'm sorry, they
Yes.
didn't teach me Ebonics in school, so I don't speak Ebonics. I can speak Ebonics, but if you're going to be
I
intelligent,
bet you can't.
I
I
can
bet
I
you
can
can't.
fake it for a couple minutes.
Okay.
But that's it. Then I have to oh, I got to go somewhere.
You know what though? We got to clarify our terminology, because I, for one, for about the last 10 years, I've been constantly saying, "Oh, those damn liberals." I've been saying it constant, damn
Right.
liberals.
Well, this is where this whole conversation comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And on a number of occasions, you would say on the show, you'd refer to me as a liberal. I wouldn't say anything, but inside I'm like, oh, kind of feels like you punched me in the gut a little bit, because not, and your intention is clear. Your definition is clear. Mine has been muddied, and we need to set it straight. I think most people's definition has been muddied. You said once to me that this far left faction is actually trying to ride in what's it when you're racing and you follow in somebody's like wake or something like that. They're trying to do that with liberals, the
Yeah,
liberal
they
party.
are. That's exactly right.
So you go ahead and explain
Well,
that,
no, I
and
mean,
let's explain what a
this is how
liberal
you,
is. Yeah.
as I was saying before, I'm a conservative. I
Mm-hmm.
have much in common with liberals. We both believe in the freedoms that are set forth in the Declaration of Independence, the limitations of the federal government that are set forth in the Constitution. We believe in what's in the Bill of Rights. And there's a reason for the order of the Bill of Rights, the First and the Second Amendment being the most important. These are things that conservatives and liberals can agree with. The Progressive Party, or the progressive members
Far
of
left.
any party, and they can be in the Republican Party too. There's progressives that are in the Republican Party, and there's progressives that are in the Democratic Party. They have masked themselves as Republicans and Democrats, and it's very clever. It's a very clever tactic. And what's really happened is that the Progressive Party has an aim to take over, in particular, the Democratic Party. And as you're seeing out there right now, it is a full and frontal attack on our basic liberties. And when we take a look at this stay-at-home thing, I got to say, I just like Marion Sheridan was saying a couple of weeks ago on our special edition, I was all for it at first. Then when you start to look at the vitriol that has come out, especially from the progressives that are in government right now regarding opening the government back up, it starts to send a louder message to me about what their goals are and what their aims are. And it seems to me to be an attack on my own civil liberties. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness has a particular meaning. We take a look at the sanctity of life. We take a look at the pursuit of happiness has everything to do with private property. And private property means not only social freedoms, but economic freedoms. The ability for me to make a living, for me to be able to save money, for me to be able to provide not only for my retirement, but pass on a next nest egg to my children and my children's children. My ability to govern myself through economic freedom is a main staple of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. This is something that liberals and conservatives have historically agreed on for the duration of our government. And not only that, that type of philosophy has changed the world in many different ways. One in particular is if you take a look at the mortality rate of human beings, not only in the United States, but across the world, because of our influence across the world, our mortality rate has doubled since the United States became a nation. That's why I'm saying that this progressive party or leftist party that has come in to take over our country it can be devastating to what we're looking at as far as our civil and economic freedoms. I mean, we are told that we can't go to places that we have paid our hard-earned tax dollars to earn a right to. Our parks, our beaches are ours. They are not the government's. We paid for those places. Those are ours. Not only have we paid for them with our money, we've paid for it with our blood through wars to be able to protect these areas. So when the people actually want to have access to these places, what we're seeing now is we're seeing progressive leaders in the government who are using their power to actually shut down access to those people to those places in retaliation to our desire for freedom under the guise of I'm going to protect your lives. Well, just recently, the UN came out with a report this week that said the next pandemic that's going to happen is not a virus. It's going to be poverty and starvation as a result of this virus. The virus is not what's going to cause this, Barry. It's because we have shut down the economy across the world that's going to cause this. I mean, if you have a 401k out there, if you have money that's in stocks and bonds right now, you, as well as myself, have been hurt big time. And this is stuff I've worked all my life to be able to save. And all we see is it's going down, down, down as the government has come in with these ginormous stimulus packages, which has the net effect of causing inflation. Inflation is going to cause the value of your dollar to go down. So it's a double whammy here. So this is where I'm seeing the difference, Barry, is that liberals agree that, wait a second, we've got to take a look at our freedoms here. Our freedoms, the freedoms that have been allotted to us by God and are supposed to be supported by the government, as the Declaration of Independence says, should not be trumped by, I'm going to try to protect your life. That's something that liberals and conservatives always have agreed on.
Yeah. And what about, I only know a little bit about this. I've heard of, that's going to sound ironic, I've heard a little bit about this herd thing.
Herd immunity.
Yeah, herd immunity, that we naturally build up an immunity if we're in proximity to people with a sickness.
I love that you just brought that up, Barry, because just recently, Dr. Dan Erickson and Martin Mashihi, I think I've pronounced it right. These are two physicians that are from Bakersfield, California, out of Kern County, and they have a chain of urgent care facilities here, and they've done about 5,000 COVID-19 tests, about half of the tests for Kern County. And what they've done is they've extrapolated the numbers out to show that first off, the mortality rate for COVID-19 is much lower than the models actually had predicted, above 3%, something like that. Really, using the raw data, the mortality rate is more like 0.1%, which is right around the same level as the flu. What these guys are is that they specialize in virology. And what in other words, they're experts on our immune system. And what they're saying is that our immune system operates by coming in contact with viruses. And then as a result, the immune system creates antibodies in our system to fight off those viruses. And their premise is pretty logical. They say that if we are quarantining the sick and the well, what happens to the well people is that their immune system actually starts to go in reverse, so that when we do come in contact with people, our bodies are not ready for the viruses that are out there in everyday human contact. In order to actually strengthen your immune system, you have to come in contact with other people, with other things that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And what he said, what the major premise is that by quarantining ourselves, we're actually weakening ourselves and creating a terrible situation for the future. And what he's saying is that we need to go back to work, and two things are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is we're going to see an uptick in sicknesses, but that's going to level off, and it's going to go back to normal. And then we're going to be able to fight this. Now, the herd mentality is just that. The more people that come into contact with these types of viruses, the more that the herd, they're comparing it to animals, but the population is able to fight off these diseases very quickly, and the less chance of us passing these diseases off to the most vulnerable of people. And we've already identified this, at 90% of the people that have passed away from these from COVID-19 are over 50. 70% of them are over 70. And that most of these people who have died had some sort of respiratory illness that went along with this. So these are the people that are the most vulnerable to these things. And
I got to tell you, because if this sounds a little far-fetched to some people, there's so much scientific data of different types that goes along with this. And for one, I remember seeing a Dateline special like 10, 15 years ago. It was very interesting. It was about the immunity system in kids, who gets the most sick, and who's the healthiest, who gets sick the least. And it was found by far and away kids that were raised on farms sick the least by far, because they're exposed to everything all day, every day, so they're the healthiest. And, and I think about today, remember, as a kid, I used to love grabbing those pretzel rods out of the plastic thing, and everybody had their hand in there a million times. It probably overall was a good thing.
I think so.
In the grand scheme of things. So that, to your point. Now, the other thing about this herd thing, people might think at face value, it's, so if you're within 6 feet of somebody that has this, your body somehow maybe picks up on it and strengthens the immunity.
Right.
It goes beyond that. There is a thing amongst species called transference that has been, again, proven in many scientific studies. A good study was many years ago in Europe, back when they had milkmen that left the milk on the step in the glass bottles with the foil tops on them many years ago. Yeah. Well, they did that for years and years and years. And then one day, one bird found that he could put his beak in there and get all this delicious milk out. And then within a matter of a couple of months, if that, maybe less than that, they couldn't leave it out anymore because the birds were all, they didn't hold a town meeting and discuss this amongst themselves, these birds. It's a transference thing. And birds flying south in formation, all right? That's all a transference that just happens naturally. I am saying to you that I do believe that this herd immunity goes beyond you simply being within a 6 feet or whatever proximity of someone and your body sensing it. It's that it transfers amongst us collectively. Right. The human race is picking up on, we have this threat, and the immunity system needs to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it works. It's like the virus actually works in reverse, and this is scientific fact. Mm-hmm. But there is a contingent out there, and I would say this is part of the progressive movement as well, to convince you that that's absolutely not the truth. Case in point, this these two doctors that I just told you about, put out a YouTube video that they had the press come out, and they talked about this. This is how I was informed about it. But YouTube decided to take it down from their network. They decided that this was a danger to society to go against what the World Health Organization and many others are saying, and therefore they've taken it down. And we've seen this. Facebook, for example, we had not Doctor, but Marion Sheridan on the show the other day talking about Project Gridlock. Well, Facebook took down their post that was on there about the protest, and it was because they said for defying government guidance on social distancing, they banned Project Gridlock from their social network. And so there is this act of suppression that's happening in the media, and we've seen this over time here in the United States. Woodrow Wilson being the father of progressivism, along with FDR, these people were big time censorship people, and they would put people in jail if they were saying the wrong things. And where did they get that? I mean, take a look at the seeds of progressivism. Take a look at communist nations and socialist nations. That's exactly what they do. Liberals don't believe in that. Going back to that whole subject of liberal versus conservative, they don't believe that. So when you're seeing a shutdown of free speech, that is not an American tradition whatsoever.
I've been fighting a sneeze here for the last 10 seconds. I was sure it was gonna go. How on earth, this is one I've wondered for a long time, how on earth is it that these far left people have picked up on calling people fascist Nazis?
You know, that's a great question. And as we know, the fascist movement started in Italy, actually, before World War II. And then the Nazi movement happened, and that actually happened after the Italian movement, but they took it to another level with anti-Semitism. But the seeds of both of those organizations came from communism. Mussolini, who was the head of fascism, the father of fascism, was very much associated with Lenin. Lenin actually had been in England for some time, and the two were friends. And when Mussolini came up with the fascist manifesto, he actually shared it with Lenin, and Lenin thought it was good. So if Lenin thought it was good, I mean, come on. He's not going to think anything that's not communist is good. So
didn't
fascism,
Stalin follow Lenin? Is that
yes,
okay.
That's exactly
and he killed
right.
100 million people.
Yes, exactly. Millions and
this
millions
is good
of
stuff,
people
folks.
that he had actually purged out of the nation. He starved hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians to death. He purged people out of his own party. He had Trotsky killed as well. So these people are brutal. Lenin did the same thing when he came to power. One of the first things that he did was what's called the Reign of Terror, where he had to eliminate all of his political enemies. That's what these people do. Now, when World War II happened, we were fighting the fascists, right? Italy and Germany were two of our enemies from the Axis powers. And but it was interesting because in our own leadership, we had a contingent of fascists and also communists that were working for FDR. And so after the war was won, this is where the big lie came into place, is that, first off, most people didn't really understand what fascism is. But I'll tell you, one of the main tenets of fascism is that you don't have economic freedom. You can't own your own business. The businesses actually belong to the government, and the business leaders are really just figureheads. And so really under capitalism, private property and business ownership are really the main staples of what capitalism is. And so after World War II, we couldn't actually just say that the actual fascists in government, which had congregated under the Democratic Party, couldn't say that, oh yeah, we're fascists. They had to make up what fascism was. So I think the the big advantage to calling somebody a fascist is that most people don't understand what fascism
Agreed.
actually is. And so it's easy to call somebody a fascist, and it always conjures up the swastika when we say that, and Hitler and this oppressive type
Right.
of government. But
Right.
but conservatism is actually, the definition of conservatism is conserving the original intent of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which stands completely against what fascism stands for.
Right.
So it's a convenient way to shame somebody for actually having idealistic ideas, idealism around the Constitution
Hmm.
and its
Yeah,
original intent.
it's kind of interesting how they also, the irony of it all, the hypocrisy of it all, because what we always talk about is how they throw out all the identity politics and call everybody racists, and but we're here to save you. And like, who is one of the biggest racists in this country? That would be Al Sharpton. You
Oh boy,
know,
I would agree.
yeah, if you're
Well,
fanning the flames of racism, that makes you a pretty strong racist.
Well, isn't it interesting that it's the progressives that are always trying to divide us with race and gender?
Yeah.
And when you go back to the Nazis, what were they doing? They were
Oh, yeah.
using racism to propagate their own politics. So
Right.
that's another thing too, is this whole the Democratic Party and how they were able to bring the black population into their side, is that we'd just fought this war over racism, really. Uh,
Hmm.
and so they couldn't identify with that anymore. They made a hard turn to pull in the black population. And of course, the black population had started to come over towards the Democratic Party in the 30s during the Great Depression,
With all the
because they were being
promises.
offered all of these promises under the New Deal. Exactly.
And it's still the same every 4 years. They
But
get offered all
notice,
these promises again.
I would have to say, notice I thought it was really interesting during Trump's State of the Union this year, where he was talking about black unemployment being at the lowest levels that they had been in
Right.
our history. And
Right.
then when they would show the Democratic side, especially the black Congress people and senators, well, there aren't any, there's only one black senator actually, but and he's a Republican. But the black Congress, the black caucus, none of those people were standing up. None of them were clapping. And it's like, wait a second, aren't you for low unemployment for black people? But if it was
Right.
Trump saying it or conservatives saying it, they couldn't. It doesn't that strike you as odd?
I think that would be if I were in their shoes, that would be a very uncomfortable position to be in. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't, really. Actually, that party's going to just say, no, you're right. You're right. No matter what, and support you for not standing, for low black unemployment.
Well,
That's
it
how I
seems
feel.
like there's a suppression of information that's going on with the progressives, and that's what they stand for. And you've seen this before in governments that have been traditionally our enemies, like the USSR, like the Nazis, like the fascists in Italy. But here we have, our First Amendment, which is freedom of the press, really under attack right now.
Mm,
And I think one of the areas where you can see this most glaringly right now has everything to do with how they're covering Joe Biden right now.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And this
No,
whole
more
thing that's happened,
hypocrisy on display.
well, I think it's pretty interesting. And I think this is going to be a major subject especially going into the election. But this whole accusation that's come down the pipe from Tara Reid, who says
Mm,
back in 1993 that she was harassed and molested by Joe Biden, and the coverage it's been deafening silence
hmm.
actually regarding this. And the interesting thing is that she has several people that are collaborating her story. Even that wasn't bringing coverage in, but the turning point happened when the CNN show with Larry King a clip of his show came out from 1993, where it appears that Tara Reid's mother called into the Larry King show and was from San Luis Obispo, which, by the way, Barry, that's a very small town, which Tara Reid's mother actually was from. And she was saying, what do I do? My daughter is saying that she was harassed and there's no place for her to go except for the press. What should we do? And so that was a big collaboration to Tara Reid's story. And so now media outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post have actually started, and CNN have started to actually report on this. But if you compare that to Brett Kavanaugh and how
bringing out fake witnesses and creating allegations.
Yeah. She actually didn't have any, Blasey Ford, she actually didn't have any collaborators to say that they had seen this or even heard her speak about it at the time. And there was about 700 different stories that CNN had put out there. And then you had this gigantic Me Too movement moving against Kavanaugh, where thousands and thousands of people, mostly women, came down there and they were screaming just with this. They were so emotional about this whole thing. And I got to say, if these people did these things that they were accused of, then they deserve to be punished for that. Sure. I totally stand for that, but it should be equal on both sides of the aisle. If somebody's accused of this, they should have the same treatment. And this is what we're not seeing. I think
buddy, they would love to take down the Electoral College for the next election and then resurrect it back again when it's, becomes useful for them again. It's like that constantly.
Well, the very people that were standing for Christine Blasey Ford and saying that we should believe women.
Alyssa Milano made a big thing for herself over this. Yeah.
Yeah. And now she's not standing with Tara Reid. Nope. Yeah. Not only that, but we have some people that are actually just so mad about this right now. But it was let me see if I can find my note. Yeah, Rose McGowan, who really was pioneered the Me Too movement. Now she's on fire about this.
In what way? I have not heard. I know that she suffered from sexual assault, rape, something like that. So,
yeah, from the guy that's in jail,
Weinstein.
Yeah, Harvey Weinstein. And she's actually come out and saying, hey, I thought the Democrats were the good guys in this whole thing, but your lack of coverage on this and how these people, like she's come after Alyssa Milano actually and saying, you're a liar. You actually, this were her exact words on Twitter. She called her a liar, saying that I thought you stood for women and believing women, but here when Tara Reid comes out with this, you're silent. What the heck?
Right.
And not only that, but remember the short list on the VP, the possible VP candidates. Remember, Joe Biden said he was going to have a woman vice president.
Has to be a woman.
Yeah. So we've got two of them have come out, Stacey Abrams and Klobuchar, and both of them are saying, well, I looked at the New York Times investigation of this, and there's nothing to show that Tara Reid has any evidence here. So I believe Joe Biden. Well, here's two things about that. Joe Biden himself hasn't said anything about it.
Yes.
He's silent about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the New York Times, if you read the New York Times investigation, you'll come away after reading that and saying, ooh, this is pretty damning for Joe Biden. So the New York Times has come out, and I'm not a fan of the New York Times, but the New York Times has come out and said, hey, stop saying that we didn't present any evidence. That is not true. Now, I just want to go on the record and say, I'm not saying Joe Biden is guilty. I have no idea. Everybody deserves their day in court. Everybody should have this investigated, because on both sides, whether you're male or female, you deserve fairness.
Yes, agreed.
But I guess that's what I'm advocating for, is that, hey, why
they opened up the can of worms.
Yeah, why is it if you're a conservative, you're guilty, but if you're a progressive, you're innocent automatically?
No, it just illustrates how wrong they were with what happened with Kavanaugh. And I'll say it as I've always said, I've never seen any kind of retribution to all of that, which is horrible. So, that just gets to perpetuate And I also want to say that this goes back as far as Monica Lewinsky.
Oh my gosh, right?
It does. And there's a terrific podcast, season 2 of do you know who the Slade is? It's a leftist
I've heard of it.
journalist organization.
Uh-huh.
Okay. It's left, admittedly. And well, season 2 of, now I can't remember what the name of their overall podcast is, but season 2 had all to do with the Clinton scandals throughout all of their history. And the narrator and lead investigative reporter, clearly there's a lot of journalistic integrity to this. And he would say on occasion, he goes, as a Democrat or a liberal or something like that, he'd say, I have a hard time reporting this right here, but, and then he goes ahead and reports it. So it was very damning for the Clintons all the way through, by a very unbiased organization. But I mean, so if anybody wants to check it out, and you're on the left, don't worry. There's all, at the very end, there's a whole bunch of, what do I want to say, like live conferencing with an audience asking questions, and it's pure Trump bashing the whole time. So you'll get your fix there. But they made very good mention of how the women's groups, the women's rights groups, women's lib groups, no support for Monica back then whatsoever. And there's a lot of parallel to what's going on right now.
Well, and you see where Hillary Clinton didn't say a word. In fact, she came out against the people that were coming against her husband and saying that these people were just plain old liars. And so she threw them under the table, or whatever the expression
under the
is.
bus.
And under the bus. There you go. And
Table's okay,
not only
though.
that, but she's come out in support of Joe Biden just this week. So she's a supporter. And boy, Tara Reid is on fire about that, because Tara Reid's a Democrat and she voted for Hillary Clinton. And she's actually saying that Hillary Clinton has done so much damage to empower men who have perpetuated this whole attack on women. And I mean, this is a big story. And I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of this. Oh, and Nancy Pelosi, of course, has come out to say that she supports Joe Biden and that she believes Joe Biden, and also referenced the New York Times article as well. So you got a lot of crazy, crazy stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I'm looking at a headline in Google News. Pelosi remains, in quotes, satisfied with Biden's response to sexual assault allegation.
What has he responded with?
Yeah, well, maybe internally. I don't know, but I haven't seen anything public. How about this headline? And it might be changing gears a little bit, but U.S. officials crafting retaliatory action against China over coronavirus as President Trump fumes.
Yeah, it's
what's going on there?
Well, I gotta say, China, it's very interesting. China had come out and they said that, this happened at a wet market in Wuhan, and that's how this got out. And we took action. We quarantined Wuhan, and so. But if you start to look at the evidence of what really happened here, the Chinese government knew weeks ahead of time that this actually was a problem and did nothing about it, did not inform anybody about it. And not only that, when they did quarantine Wuhan, they quarantined Wuhan so that people couldn't travel from Wuhan to any other places in China. However, they did not shut down international travel.
Right.
So people from Wuhan that had the disease
would have raised eyebrows, whoa, what's that?
They were able to fly internationally. Not only that, but the World Health Organization collaborated with China to say that this was not a communicable disease. It couldn't be passed from human to human. In fact, it was as late as January 14th that the World Health Organization was propagating that mistruth. And, what would China have to gain from that? We talked a lot about that with Rex Lee last week in hybrid warfare. So if you want to check that out, go back to this week. Actually, we came out with that show. It's very interesting. But I actually have some information that came out here through my crack reporting agency. But we talked about the funding of the World Health Organization and the United States being the #1 funding mechanism for the World Health Organization, giving between $400 and $500 million every year to this organization. The leader of the organization is Dr. Tedros, and Tedros has been the leader since 2017. What I'm seeing here is like I was just mentioning, a collaboration of the stories that are coming out of China. Like, it started in a wet market, but we are seeing that there was a virology lab that's in Wuhan that there's evidence now that had come out of that lab where they were testing coronavirus bats. And also, the wet market does not sell bats. And not only that, the first people that came down with coronavirus in China had not had any contact with the wet market. So there seems to be a lot of things going on. Now, why would the World Health Organization collaborate with China? And some interesting information has come out now that this Dr. Tedros has a long-standing relationship and a long history of covering up diseases and where they come from. Dr. Tedros is from Ethiopia, and he was the Minister of Health for Ethiopia for several years there in the 2000s. And now he was, the World Health Organization itself and our State Department are saying that Dr. Tedros was responsible for covering up a cholera epidemic in Ethiopia 3 separate times as the health minister. And it's also very interesting to find out that this organization that he belonged to, the political organization called the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or the TPLF, is a communist.
Damn commies.
Yeah, they're a communist socialist organization that were listed by our Homeland Security Department as a Tier 3 terrorist organization. Ooh. They were actually responsible, or part of the main part of the civil war that lasted for a decade up to 1991. That's when they were taken off of a Tier 3 terrorist organization. But under that leadership, the Ethiopian Register, which is a national or a regional publication, says that as a leader in that organization, Dr. Tedros, it has his hands dirty in the corruption, in the killings, and the mass detentions that have happened in that country. And so even the New York Times back in 2017, when Dr. Tedros was up for nomination as the director of the World Health Organization, has some damning information regarding Dr. Tedros. If you take a look at a May 2017 article by the New York Times, you're going to see that they're collaborating on the story that he was responsible for cover-ups of the cholera outbreak in 2006 and 2009 and 2011, saying that it wasn't cholera but acute watery diarrhea. You know, that it's pretty terrible that they went ahead and the World Health Organization brought him into this. But the State Department accused the Ethiopian government of displacing thousands of citizens, gunning down hundreds of protesters, and jailing and torturing political opponents. I'm sure the World Health Organization didn't bring Tedros on because of those things, but the fact that he was able to cover up this cholera outbreak may have something to do with what appears to be a cover-up here with China. And because they're a communist organization, it seems that the eternal struggle, and I'm quoting right here, that there's been an eternal struggle for communism, and that he is comrades in arms with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And so there are ties here that are very nefarious looking, and I agree that we should have pulled funding from the World Health Organization as we're investigating this. But this is where the seeds of this whole thing and the investigation and looking at the Chinese Communist Party as the responsible party for the world outbreak of COVID-19 and the possible next pandemic, which is economic collapse and starvation across the world.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there. We're going to have to start winding this up, though. We are at time, and I got some things to do. And wow, I wish we could end on a more positive note.
Yeah, that
than
was really depressing right
Yes,
there.
it was.
I have to say this. Let me just end on a positive note here, because I do see that at least here in the United States, there's a major effort to open up the economy, and we are seeing different states being very progressive. We only talked about the ones that are still trying to shut it down, but there are several states, not just Republican run, but also Democrat run. So you've got Georgia, you've got Colorado, you've got Texas, you've got North Dakota, you've got some pretty large areas that are looking to open up in a quick way. You saw the president on TV today talking about how he believed that third and fourth quarter are going to see a reversal of our economic downturn here. And I happen to believe him because
it's all
of
order, man.
I believe we're going to see these things turn around, and the only way they're going to turn around is opening these things back up. Our economy was at the highest levels that we've seen in our lifetime, and it came down very quickly. And I believe that a bounce back can happen because we still have the good soil here. It has not been ruined. And I just believe there's opportunity, especially for people that are thinking outside the box, like your friend that we mentioned at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, exactly. I want to come back to this in just a second, Merle. There's a little bit more I think we should talk about in those positive regards, which I do think that we need to unpack that a little bit. But I want to say, please, people, like and share our video, our podcast. Give us a 5-star on our podcast, please. You could get on iTunes, Google Podcasts. I said iTunes. It's been called Apple Podcasts for quite a while now, and or YouTube. You can see all of this stuff at over50startingover.com. Okay, right at your fingertips. Please comment. Please share. Please 5-star us. And Merle, let's see. We were talking about bringing the economy back. Will it? I kind of think people are going to be slow to trust, to go to the restaurants and the bars and stuff. But I tend to think that. But on the other hand, people are getting fed up with this. They're getting really fed up with it. And as we talked about a whole lot here about what's the term? Herding, the herd immunity.
Yeah, the herd immunity, right.
There's gotta be truth to that. I know that there's truth to that. I don't want this coronavirus. It's supposed to be absolutely horrible. I've had a bad flu before. It's like dying a slow death. It truly is. I don't want it. I don't want to pass it on. But I think that I just feel that we do have to get on the other side of it before we kill ourselves by our own means, economically, as you have stated.
Well, and what we're finding out too is that most of the cases are asymptomatic, which means that you could contract corona without even having any symptoms whatsoever.
Yeah.
The data that's out there is that once that happens, your body will automatically create antibodies, and you're going to be fine. And for people that don't have pre-existing conditions, if you do actually come down with the symptoms of it, yeah, it sucks getting the flu, but we've all gotten it and we've gotten over it, and you're not going to die. That's the thing.
We definitely are going to come up with treatments for it.
They already have.
This morning. Yeah, UH is on to yet another promising treatment for it, and it said it lessened the symptoms of it by 4 days.
Yeah, we saw that, and there's all kinds of evidence of that. We're going to see all that kind of stuff, and I, for one, can't wait to go back to restaurants. I love.
Yeah, me too. It's the biggest pleasure that most of us have, really.
I think people are smart enough to realize that there's ulterior motives here, and that they're just not going to take this anymore. They're going to go back to the beaches. They're going to go back to the parks. They're going to go back to the restaurants and bars. And I think we're going to see a surge, actually, Perry. That's my prediction.
I like it, and I hope so. And I wouldn't mind seeing a surge of a few questions coming my way about helping you out with getting your own presence online so that you can reach more people across the country. Okay, you can do a hybrid type thing where you're doing some consulting, as we've gotten so used to Zoom all of a sudden. So take advantage of it. And with that, let's part on this season 2, episode 1 episode, and I'll see you next week. What do you say?
Sounds good. Congratulations on the season 2 start, and can't wait to see you next time.
Yep, can't wait.